Hey, today I'm gonna start a new reading vlog. Hopefully it will be like a little bit more short term than some of my other ones, but who knows. Yeah, this is gonna be hopefully a vlog of me finishing a bunch of books because I've just been like starting and I have finished some books, but like the rate at which I'm adding books to my like currently reading piles is way quicker than I'm actually finishing, so it's like getting bigger even if sometimes I'm like switching one for one. To kind of set the scene, I thought I would go through what I'm currently reading, and most things are at like various different stages, although I guess a couple of them are like just quite early on. I think some of the oldest things I've been reading are these two. This is Jill by Amy Dilwyn. I am on page 142 and I have made progress since I originally first started reading it in like 2020. I made some progress maybe like last year, but then I just totally stopped. It is something I want to read, I want to finish. I can't promise that I will read this in this time, but it's, you know, it is on my currently reading list. So, and then there's this book, which is The Subversive Stitch, Embroidery and the Making of the Feminine by Rosika Parker. And on this, I'm on page 68. So that's like, I guess like a quarter, I don't know, a third maybe. And yeah, this is like a non-fiction book. It does have some images in it and I was really enjoying it. It's just, it is non-fiction. I'm in the sections, or at least what I remember, because I haven't picked this up for a while, where they're talking about medieval stitching especially. It's a really great book so far. It's really interesting, especially if you're interested in like art history, textiles, feminism, and then also just like the sort of pervasive or like pernicious influence of Victorians over our understanding of history. I feel like the Victorians have often done like a lot of damage because they were some of the first people to maybe become more self-aware about like the study of things like history and like record keeping and stuff. I mean, this is very generalized, but as a result, because they had such like a specific lens about like femininity, women, economics, like the role that women were allowed to play, they just completely erased women from a lot of archives and from like a lot of histories, not just in this context, but specifically this is thinking about like women in like guilds and stuff and their contributions to textile work. So this kind of trying to undo some of that damage and correct the legacy. Let's stick with some non-fiction. So I've also got The Jewish People, Their History and Their Religion by David J. Goldberg and John D. Rayner, which I mean, I haven't read very much of, and I definitely won't finish it in this either, but it would be nice to make a bit more progress. I've also got this book, Striking a Light, The Brian and May Matchwomen and Their Place in History by Louise Raw, which I read some of the introduction of, but didn't finish it. I'm not really looking to finish this whole book, but I am kind of looking to like maybe at least finish the introduction. Yeah, I would imagine like chapter 2, chapter 5, actually, and chapter 1 would probably be useful for me. So then we have this book, which is Dr. Edith Vane and the Hares of Crawley Hall by Suzette Mayer, which I got about 30 pages in. It's fun. It's a sort of absurdist dark academia story, I think, from what I know about the satire that takes the hallowed halls of the campus novel in fantastical and unsettling directions. So yeah, I was enjoying it. I just sort of like was reading too many things, so I sort of paused it. But I mean, it's still in my currently reading, you know? This one's another one that like I thought I would read, or like start at least with audio, because I found a free version of it, but I didn't especially like the narrator, or at least was just finding it hard to like actually listen. And you know, just like sometimes when you listen to an audiobook you can't tune in properly, it means you just constantly fall out of the narrative and then you have to go back all the time. And I really want to like read this intentionally and listen to it, but like also just like listen to what it has to say. So I sort of stopped doing that. And maybe I'll have to wait until like my head is less like massively overwhelmed. Then I also have The Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tucholk, which I actually am quite enjoying. I am now 200 pages in, so that's great. I think this one is probably what I'm most far in reading. This isn't everything. Like I'm about to like look through my currently reading page 2, and there's a bunch of stuff like at my desk that I'm reading for my research too that I'm gonna include in this. But yeah, anyway, so back to this. This is like a YA book, fantasy, about like 4 girls and 1 guy who are like these boneless mercies, which means they're like hired to kill people who like are really ill or are gonna die a really painful death otherwise. And then, you know, one of them wants glory. Yeah, it's kind of silly because like it's obviously based on like Scandinavian sagas and stuff, you know, understandings of glory and the hero's journey and blah blah blah, but it's like changed from like Norse to be vorse and things like that, so it's sort of like a little bit silly but enjoyable. At least I'm finding it. Oh, I also am reading Red Rosa, the biography by Kate Evans, which is over there and I'm just not gonna get it. I'm about like 30% of my way in that. I'm also reading Seaweed, a Cornish idyll by Edith Ellis, not Evans, Edith Ellis, which is for my research. I'm about 25% of the way through that, but it's quite short. That one I probably will finish fairly quickly. Another book that I have been listening to sort of for months, but not regularly or anything, because I started it maybe in like May 2022, and that's Matrix by Lauren Groff. That one I think would be fairly easy to like finish, so hopefully I will. Some of this is because like I have audio versions of them, but like only in one place, and I can't get them on my like phone, for example. I did also start reading The Essential Decks to Watch Out For by Alison Bechdel. Then it got recalled to the library, and then I left like a little note in it because it got recalled, so presumably the person who called for it is also like a dyke, and then they never picked it up. So I've just been like leaving that in the library because I kind of want to see if anybody cute will like open the book and like take it out before I take it out again. But I would like to finish that at some point. Oh my gosh, this is so many things. Okay, I'm also reading Margaret Dunmore or A Socialist Home by Jane Hume Clapperton. I think I'm probably like 30% of the way through this. Also for my research, it's not a priority, so like I'm definitely going to try and finish Seaweed in this, but that one I may or may not finish it, but maybe I'll read a bit more of it, who knows. I did mark that I was reading Walter Benjamin's Illuminations, which is a series of his essays, because I read a couple of them in there, and I have one specifically that I want to definitely still read, but I'm not reading the whole collection, so it sort of doesn't really count, I think. Anything else? Yes, lastly, I started reading this, which is The Night Watch by Sarah Waters, because of Dewiathon. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, I meant to check. But now I don't have, I have to film this right now, otherwise, like, whatever. Yeah, because she's a Welsh author, and on the 1st of March into the 30th of March, or however many days there are in March, there's a readathon where, you know, you read Welsh books. I think it's also just kind of like books about Wales, set in Wales. They don't necessarily have to be by Welsh authors, but Sarah Waters is Welsh. Yeah, I've wanted to read this for ages. It'll be my third, I think, Sarah Waters, and I'm excited. I'm on page like 16 so far, so I'm making my way. Yeah, also there's the Irish readathon this month, and I'm gonna also put this into the mix. I haven't started reading it, and I think it won't take that long, so that's good. But basically, this is Home, a comics anthology on belonging in Ireland today. And basically my friend and her partner, their like comic is in this, so it has a lot of different like really beautiful looking comics. Hers is called The Geographic Cure. It looks beautiful. Yeah, so I'd like to read this now, and also it fits with the Irish readathon, so that's cool. So at least I can have one book for each cool readathon going on right now. I think that is everything. So I guess like, yeah, I will come back and update you when there's any progress that I have made on any of these many books. I guess I'm kind of hoping to finish this pretty soon. I think that's probably a likely finish, because it's pretty easy to read, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm over halfway through. So yeah, okay, bye. Hey, so I don't have any reading update, but I did get some exciting post that is a bunch of kosher food stuffs, so I wanted to show that because I'm excited. I already started eating this babka, which is pretty delicious, so that's nice. I also got some halma. This is just very exciting for me. Oh yeah, I got these chocolate marshmallow things, which like, oh okay, they're a bit disappointing. I thought they would be nicer than they are. I have some grape juice, obviously. I have this like massive jar of applesauce. I love applesauce, so I'm excited to eat that. I have some hamantaschen, chocolate hamantaschen. I do plan to make my own. Purim is like coming up really soon when I'm filming this, but I wanted to like try somebody else's because I feel like that's something I really missed out on in terms of like, part of it is that I'm really shy and also I'm chronically ill, but like, yeah, I feel like I don't get to like try other people's or like try other forms that aren't like stuff I make for religious observance. I don't know if that makes any sense, but basically it's like I've eaten my own challah so many times. I feel like it can be really different to like eat somebody else's or to like actually taste what like other people are eating rather than just relying on like my own baking skill, which like who knows if I'm doing it right. Do you know what I mean? maybe. Okay, like I got some I got some raspberry jello because I love jelly and I want to make some, and I think I'll make some for Purim. I think that would be like a suitably fun thing to do. And then I got some chocolate, mostly because this is by a company that is called Gross. Probably not pronounced like that, but I was like, I cannot not get this chocolate. I got some sour green apple chewy candy. Basically, I did just get a bunch of sweets, and I got some strawberry like licorice twisty things. And yeah, really cool. And they all have like kosher certifications from various places, which I find very exciting right now. Yeah, this is very random, sorry, but I wanted to include it because it made me happy. So, alright. I will hopefully update you actually next time when I have less messy hair, geez, but also when I've actually done some reading. Okay. I did read Home, a comics anthology on belonging in Ireland today, edited by Catherine Foyle. I read it on Shabbat actually, all in one go. It's really lovely. I cried it multiple times. I did really like my friend's comic. There was the first one I really enjoyed because it was in some way about Judaism or Jewish people, but it was also quite hard to read. But that was really the only one that I felt like the text was just like not great in that sense, because obviously sometimes that just happens with comics. There's not that many, it's like quite short, but there's a couple like trans ones which are nice. I think the last one was my least favorite, which is kind of a shame because obviously it like ends on a least fave, but not in, you know, not to like a massive depth or anything. So yeah, it was lovely. I'll leave like a link where I got this in the description box. I also wanted to do this update because I have now baked some hamantaschen. My original plan was to do like a taste test between the hamantaschen that I bought and my own baked ones, but I left the leftovers of those in. Oh, that one doesn't look so great, I guess. I don't know, I guess, and I have eaten one. And here's my, without actually doing like a taste test, here's what I think. I think mine look much worse. It's also because like they put chocolate on theirs, and like I could have done that, but I was like probably a bit too much chocolate actually, because mine are like stuffed with Nutella, and some of them have like chocolate chips in too. But yeah, so mine look worse, although this one is looking quite nicely held together. But they taste like pretty good, both of them, and I think mine might taste slightly better. So yeah, that's the update on that. I haven't made much progress on the boneless mercies. I've just not been feeling up for it. But I have been making progress with the Night Watch, which is nice. I'm like over 100 pages in now, and you know, it's a Sarah Waters book, so it's quite slow and it's all character and we're like meeting everybody. And also this starts in 1947, and I know that it goes back in time. We come to understand why things are the way they are maybe at the beginning rather than the opposite direction. We met like a butch car mechanic, and obviously I'm in love with her, and yeah, It's good. Sarah Waters is pretty good. We all know this. Okay. Hey, so I'm not updating you that I have finished anything yet. Also, I feel like you're gonna see me wearing this all the time because I'm having a really hard time and I'm just wearing this comfortable, oversized hoodie. Anyway, but I did want to kind of talk about, what did I want to talk about? I wanted to talk about The Night Watch and like a couple little references that I think that Sarah Waters is making. And yeah, just like that are part of like her contextualization, I guess, and also I guess also just part of her research, part of her knowledge about, you know, the 19th and 20th centuries. Obviously this is in the 20th century, but you know, her two other books that I've read so far were both Victorian, and she obviously did a bunch of research for both of them, especially I think for Tipping the Velvet. First of all, I'll tell you that I am 350 or so pages into this, so I am like in the final, you know, third, so that's good. I think I might make less progress now. But it's good I got that chunk out and I can definitely finish reading this, you know, so that's good. And one of the things I saw recently, which was just like this one little reference, I did take a photo so I will insert it. Somebody said something about a Miss Ogilvy and I was like, oh, I really recognize that name. Is that not a reference to another book? I actually originally thought it was that Gertrude Stein kind of novel thing that has maybe like a kind of similar name as that. So, but anyway, so I searched for Miss Ogilvy, and of course it's not Gertrude Stein, but a Radcliffe Hall novel. It's called Miss Ogilvy Finds Herself, and it is about a woman after the First World War struggling with her sense of self. So obviously Radcliffe Hall is like a queer author, so it all feels like kind of like a little reference there, a little like cheeky nod. And then the other reference is that one of the characters in here, Julia, she's a detective, a fiction writer, and it talks about how, I mean, at the beginning in 1947, and then when it goes back in time it talks a bit more about it, but we're told that like she used to live in Mecklenburg Square when, yeah, she was like starting out writing. I definitely wouldn't have considered this at all if I hadn't recently read Square Haunting, 5 Women, Freedom and London Between the Wars by Francesca Wade. But I read this last year and I did talk about it on my channel a couple times. Mecklenburg Square was obviously house to the 5 women at some point that this book is talking about. So that's H.D. Dorothy L. Sayers, who was herself a detective fiction writer or like a murder mystery writer, Jane Ellen Harrison, Eileen Power and Virginia Woolf. And I mean, the Virginia Woolf chapter or section in this book is probably the weakest part of the book, I would say, because like I don't think there's much new stuff said about Woolf in it necessarily, whereas the other figures are either like underknown enough or like underexplored enough that like it's more interesting, at least in my experience. So Mecklenburg Square now has like a much different place in my own kind of like literary imagination or like understanding of like London and women writers in London, especially in the interwar era or like from, you know, 1915 until 1950, as this container of like women's creative writing space and practice. Yeah, that's a kind of thanks to this book. I'm sure that Sarah Waters is referencing any number of those women, a lot of whom were like sapphic, so it all would make sense with this. Oh yeah, look at this incredible picture. That's Jane Ellen Harrison and Hope Marley's Being Weird about bears. And then yeah, I really love this picture of Eileen Power. It was this like sort of socialist historian, I guess. Like I think she's one of the people who started economic history as like a sort of discipline or practice. Yeah, and there's lots of other pictures too. I feel like Virginia Woolf is making a funny face in this one, but there you go. It's with Leonard and her dog. I'm definitely going to go through this and try to kind of pinpoint what I thought was useful or interesting about it when I was reading it before, which I was listening to it. Yeah. Like I said, I sort of feel like I've now read like quite a lot of the Sarah Waters and I think I might need to ease off a little bit. So I am hoping to pick up the Boneless Mercies again, or maybe keep reading Red Rosa. I think honestly I have like bandwidth for Red Rosa now. The less words I need to deal with, the better. Other than again, this as a comic has quite a few words. It's got lots of pictures too. I will talk to you later. Hey, so I finished a book. Ow. yeah, I did a bunch of reading on Shabbat, and so I finished something, and that book was Matrix by Lauren Groff, and this is something I think I was reading since like June 2022 or whatever, so that's funny. But in a way it kind of worked to do that, because like it's quite like a sort of weirdly syncopated novel that feels kind of like weighted in time and completely out of time, and sort of like very narratively choppy, kind of like some parts go fast and then some parts are much slower and much more in depth. I know that a lot of people like, I really loved this book or really didn't like this book, and I actually am in the middle. I thought it was okay. Which I guess isn't that interesting. Brief synopsis is that this book is about Marie, who is a French noblewoman, but as a result of her like nobility status and stuff, the queen sends her to a nunnery to basically get her like out of the way, and she doesn't want to do that. I think she is sent there when she's like about 17, and it is like about what she does basically with that community of women, how she like transforms herself, transforms her circumstances, like the abbey or like the nunnery or whatever it's called, the convent. It's set in about the late 12th century into the early 13th century. Yeah, I would say that as a historical fiction novel, it's not one of those ones that's like super like character focused, very slow, because we do get a lot of characters and we do get some character development, but the way that, yeah, like I said, the time kind of works, it's a bit more choppy, but it does cover quite a long span of time, because we cover from about when Marie is like 17 or like a child to the time when she dies. So yeah, this book I think is based on two women, one of whom is Marie de France, and also another one who's maybe like Mary of Shaftesbury or something, who was also an abbess in England, who was famous at the time. I can't remember, but I definitely feel like I've read that somewhere. And like going in, I was somewhat aware of Marie de France because I read some of her, like the Lays of Marie de France. I read like a Penguin collection of that quite a few years ago now, but I did really enjoy it because she wrote these kind of like folk fairy tales. I think there's one where there's like a werewolf, a lot of them are like courtly love. Yeah, I mean that's something I'd be interested in rereading. I enjoy learning about history, I enjoy learning medieval history specifically when it's focused on women, and for a while as well I guess I felt very focused on Christian religious women, because they had the capacity to sort of take control of their lives in a way that like a lot of other women didn't, as a result of their like holiness or their proximity to like God, or even like their proximity or like their ability to kind of become an institution, which is sort of what Matrix is about to some degree. The nuns are queer, so it is like a very like gay book, which is a lot of fun, but in a way, yeah, it's not a particularly romantic book, if that makes sense. Although there is sort of like there are two like overarching romances, but because of the way it's written, they aren't super heavily part of the narrative, and one of them really just like shows up right at the beginning and then shows up right at the end, which was like kind of sweet, but also it was like, no, I don't know, I thought that could have been done better. Yeah, it is quite like gory and intense. One bit that I thought was hilarious was like okay, this is gonna make me sound like really ghoulish, but basically there's this moment where people try to attack and somebody's head gets like cut off, and then the narrative just like very like matter-of-factly says like that the like novitiates that they've like been like play acting being like Judith with the head, which just made me laugh so much. Yeah, I think I'll stop talking about it now. I wouldn't like not recommend this, so you know, I think if you're interested and you like reading, maybe if you're like okay with your historical fiction not being like super dense and kind of like very clear, the way that it's done is just quite vague in general, then I would recommend this. And if you're looking for nun content, like it is good, and if you're looking for like gay nun content, for sure check it out. So yeah, I also did make a bit of progress again over Shabbat reading my Red Rosa comic, so now I'm on page 104, so that's good, and like I'm on my way, because what actually quite a lot of this book is, maybe I showed this before, but is like a bunch of notes. So there's this chunk of notes, so there's only like 80 or so more pages of the actual comic itself left. So yeah, wow, finally, how many minutes in did it take me to actually finish a book for this? Probably many. Cool, I will like hopefully be wearing something different when I next talk to you, but you know, don't hold your breath. Bye. Hi, I finished another book. So yeah, I finished my reread of Red Rosa, a graphic biography of Rosa Luxemburg by Kate Evans. Yeah, it was good. I kind of wish that there were more like sort of resources like this. I think whilst obviously this isn't like a really comprehensive biography because of its format, I think it does a pretty good job of like introducing like the person's life story as well as like her work to people, and it was good to reread it. There's definitely some stuff I forgot, especially in terms of like the First World War, working class like struggle. I can't think of the right word, like antagonism against it as a thing. I mean, I have read some stuff about like conscientious objectors and stuff, but even more than that, like I haven't read anything about like organized workers like opposing the war, which is what happened, I guess, like whilst it was happening as well as like before, though I think before it happened there was less like popular worker antagonism until people kind of realized how shitty and awful war is. Like the SPD, like group of like socialists in Germany, like they really don't come off well in this because they obviously suck. Or like they sort of tell that classic story of like radicals to begin with, and then they slowly become their own institution until they are the status quo, and you know, it's meaningless talk, and they hate revolution, which I also honestly find like a staggering position to take. I don't really understand how you can be like capitalism is bad, but you know what else is bad? Revolution. I am really struggling to like not start something new. I have like a couple books that I would like to read, and I'm gonna try and finish one more before I start a new one, because I do think I kind of need something new, but I'm gonna try and finish this before I do that. Belatedly, this got sent to me, which is a present from my brother for my birthday, and it's Minerva, A Miscarriage of the Brain, with this like great cover by Joanna Hedver, which is something I really want to read soon. I have an audiobook copy of The Deep by River Solomon, which I also really want to get to soon. I do need to figure out like, because I think the only one that I am currently reading now that has an audiobook is Everfair, which I showed at the beginning, but I'm not sure if I can like listen to that. Like I said, I was struggling a bit to like really get into it, so I think like listening to it when I'm outside isn't going to really help me there. So I do need to figure something else out to listen to in the outside world. But I'm gonna try and like keep it to something that I have already started. I also I'm tempted to like start reading Kith and Kin, which is like a critical role book. I'm going to a library today. Basically, I just have so many different library memberships, but for like my research, but also whilst I'm there I'm going to check what like graphic novels and stuff they have, because I want to see if they have any like critical role ones and stuff. Maybe I will show you that, or maybe not just critical role ones, but like some graphic novels, some comics, that kind of thing, because like I'm enjoying reading those. They're quite easy to read, and then also they're great to get out from a library. Oh, one thing I don't think I ever actually said in this, but that after I started recording I was like, I think this is a good idea, is I'm giving myself March to do this like completion thing, and then I'm hoping that in April, and maybe you won't see this until like mid-April, but like, you know, sort of basically just March, this is an ice cream in case you're wondering, will be the time that I'm spending on doing this, because like I really want to start some new stuff, and like I need to. Oh, another thing that I will hopefully be finishing soon is Seaweed by Edith Ellis, hopefully. So yeah, okay, bye. I think a lot of what I said still stands for this book. I guess partially it did this because like then it could be a bit more loose and free with like how it played around with magic and cultures and stuff, but I mean ultimately it is kind of silly because like I said, like Norse, Vorse, well, it's really interested in like oral saga stuff, and then as a result of that it's also very much like clearly the format of the story itself is very much based on like sagas and stuff. I haven't read very many. I might have read 2. I've definitely read Beowulf, so that was what I was like thinking about, and I do think that like it is related to Beowulf in its structure and stuff, and there's like 3 quest type things that happen. But as a result of that, like, because the large chunk of the book is going towards this quest and there are other issues and like obstacles that get in their way and they have to figure them out, it means that the final bit, which is obviously supposed to have built and built and built, is just very like pretty boring and like obvious what's going to happen and just kind of like doesn't really add that much to the story. It's like, I would say that the least enjoyable part of it was the end, even though I did fairly enjoyed the rest of it, you know, it was like fine. And yeah, I couldn't quite remember, but I do feel like Grendel was the Blue v Beast kind of energy. But I also, that is me not really remembering my Beowulf, so because there's like 3 and one of them is a dragon, isn't it? There wasn't really a dragony one, but yeah, like one of them, Grendel, Beowulf, like follows to her like cave underwater and stuff, and like that had similar vibes. One major thing I would say about it is that like it's so gay, but it's not gay at all. Like, it's not gay, which is kind of staggering because the key relationships are these 4 girls, and there is this like guy who travels with them called Trickery, who I was like, oh, why is he here? But he is kind of nice, and he has like actually what I would describe as a really nice friendship with Frey, but he also is just kind of like silent, and he like does whatever they want basically, which I also kind of like. The fact that it's not gay, it's just weird because like they are all gay, at least in some capacity, and then like right at the end, you know, like Frey like sleeps with some guy and it just feels very like tacked on and weird because it's such like a homosocial book. These women and girls, they like care for each other so deeply and they look out for each other, but then it's not gay. Like, it's just like they're obviously in like a polycule. I just think some of it is also just like not that like believable. I think it needed to be longer if it wanted to be like as kind of like culturally deep as it's sort of trying to be, but isn't. A lot of it is just kind of like background noise for like the story, but then the story isn't that like intense either. Whatever. The next thing I'm gonna read is this, Seaweed by Edith Ellis. So I'm on page 42, I think, still 46. Yeah, it isn't very long. I went through the books that I originally said I was reading at the beginning of this, and I think out of those I've read maybe 3 or 4, so we're on our way. I think also at this point I'm gonna try and hold off for as long as possible and like read this as long as possible, but I think I am gonna start a new book, and I'm pretty sure that book is gonna be the audio version of The Deep by Rivers Solomon, because I've just been like hankering to read it, and also been thinking quite a lot about like memory versus history, and I think it will be interesting in that respect. Yeah, I'm doing this like course where it's kind of intense and it's basically about like reproductive rights in the UK and Ireland, and one of the weeks we focused on the mother and baby homes, like the Magdalene laundries in Ireland, and I'm not going to talk about them in depth, like it's pretty upsetting, but I will leave some links in the description box if you want to learn about it. For the class we read this report that somebody wrote in response to the kind of like official governmental inquiry into what happened. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, like, sorry, I'm not going to explain it. Yeah, in the report they talked about how, because a lot of the information was like basically like witness testimony, oral history collection, that kind of thing, and they kind of like, yeah, they said that the report did this kind of like very gendered thing of like history versus memory, and then that just got me thinking a lot of, in general, but also in terms of specifically like marginalized histories, and how if you discount memory from history, from like capital H history, you can tell like such a different story, and like such a oppressive one, I guess, and like one that just does not heed people's, again, especially like marginalized people's like subjectivity and like presence even in the narrative or in life. Yeah, anyway, that was a bit tense, but I think like if I do read The Deep, it will be intense. Like, hopefully I will also finish this and come back to you in a few days, and yeah, bye. But if I don't record this now, the next time I record something for this vlog, it's going to be like really, really long, because I finished like a bunch of stuff in chronological order. The thing that I next finished after reading the bonus Mercies is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. It was about like 4 hours on audiobook, so I read it quite quickly, but it was great. It was read by David Diggs, and like, if you don't know, the sort of etiology, is that the right word, of the novella is that it's like based off of a clipping song / album called The Deep, which is about this concept of these sea human mermaid creatures being birthed from the bodies of enslaved pregnant women who were thrown off of slave ships into the ocean. And I think the Deep album was inspired by another album, and I can't remember exactly the name of that, but I will try and indicate it. So it's this sort of like, not necessarily like circular, but just kind of like unfolding, refolding, inspirational kind of loop or collective exploration of something in different ways and mediums and forms. The book itself I thought was great. I feel like this is the one that's going to suffer if I try to talk about it a lot here, so maybe I'll try and come back to it another time I film and instead just give you more of a brief update about my progress right now. But yeah, overall I think The Deep is a really interesting exploration of memory, history, of disability, like crip body, collective memory, the legacy of enslavement, humanity. It's exploring quite a lot of like very deep and intense themes, and I think it does it pretty well. For what it is, it's great. It's very good at taking the individual compassionately as part of a whole and seeing that in a compassionate way. I don't think that makes any sense. I'll have to come back and talk more about it, I think. The next thing I read was also a thing that I just started now, because also I saw this and I got like a bunch of money off of it, so I was like, I'm gonna just read it immediately. And that's The 5 Lives of Hilma af Klint by Philip Danes, with an afterword by Julia Voss. And this is actually in translation, I think, from the German. They don't really indicate that anywhere except from right on the back page. It's translated by Renata Stein and Ruth Bittor. Yeah, so this is about Hilma af Klint, who was a Swedish artist around the turn of the century. She was just really great. I've loved her paintings. You know, I find them to be like extremely moving pieces of art. She's really interested in mediums, seances, colour theory, the fabric of reality, God, divinity, theosophy, all very interesting. She's obviously absolutely part of this sort of like breaking down of form, playing around, experimentation. Her work sort of wasn't, what she was doing, it wasn't really taken as seriously as it could have been, and it's only more recently that her legacy and her own ingenuity and innovation in terms of art has been like put to the forefront, and she's been included as part of the sort of history of art and the history of like abstract art. It sort of looks a bit like an 80s comic, like it just kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, like a sort of 80s colour palette, and like actually also what it reminded me of was like Tintin comics. I don't really know if that makes sense, but like some of the facial expressions, I think. She was gay, and obviously that's great, we love that for her. She had a girlfriend called Anna at one point. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would say that the main flaw is just that like this is not a book of Hilma af Klint's work, like it's copies of her work or like playing around with her work, which is fine, but you know, you want to see her work really. But a really good like overview, and I've been wanting to read more about her life and like actual biographies and things for a while, so this is like a good sort of introduction to that. Okay, I stuck with another thing that I wasn't like supposed to read or at least that I hadn't already started at the beginning of this, which was Critical Role Vox Machina Origins Volume 2, which is like a bind-up of the comics. It was fine. I don't really have anything to say about it. Like, I read it because I wanted to see what happened. Then the most recent thing I read was something that was on my list, and that's Seaweed by Edith Ellis, or Seaweed, a Cornish Idyll. This was very interesting to me, even if I didn't necessarily enjoy it loads, but I thought it was quite, yeah, I thought it was pretty fascinating. Definitely interesting part of my research. I think I might actually read D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover now, because this was before that. This is from 1898, but it's very obvious that, I don't know if D.H. Lawrence read this, but this was published in like multiple different forms. I find it kind of hard to believe that he wouldn't have like had any interactions with it. And I know that Lady Chatterley's Lover is like the same, except from maybe less interesting. And also, I guess, with less of like a wholesale working class focus. I mean, Edith Ellis wasn't working class, but all of her characters in this are, whereas obviously Lady Chatterley's Lover is kind of different in that respect. But yeah, basically this is just about like this man whose wife Janet, he just loves her so much, and yeah, his name is Kit, and he has suffered like an injury whilst working, I think at a mine, but I can't remember, and so he's in a wheelchair and he's kind of like grappling with that and like what that means for Janet and like what she, you know, needs, and is interested in kind of like reproduction and like sex and natural sexuality and like free love. Yeah, sort of prudish societal thoughts and approaches, also just like, yeah, women, sensuality. It's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say it's great, I'm definitely not really recommending it. Okay, so I'll briefly sort of show you some things that I'm going to read next, or I'm currently reading. I did get a chunk into Everfair by Nisi Shaw, which is great. I'm enjoying it. There's mentions of the Fabian Society and like a whole bunch of stuff that like I knew I would like. Yeah, we're sort of still in the kind of like setting up of the novel, I would say, or kind of. And yeah, I'm just excited to like keep reading it. I think I will hopefully finish it by the end of this month. Of the other things that I was currently reading at the beginning of this vlog, I would like to finish reading this, Dr. Edith Vane and the Hares of Corley Hall by Suzette Mayer. So that's sort of next up after I finished maybe this one or The Night Watch. Yeah, so I'll try to come back with some more thoughts about the deep. Okay, bye. So first things first, in my last clip I said I would talk more in depth about The Deep by Rivers Solomon, but I sort of feel like I had all of these thoughts about it whilst reading it and I thought it was really fascinating, but then now I can't sort of remember them or like articulate them in the way that I thought, which I guess is vaguely ironic. But I think it's really good, and I think if you're interested in memory, especially like animations of the idea of like what holding traumatic memory does, and especially in terms of like racialized trauma, or I guess maybe that wasn't the right way to put it, like legacies of racial exploitation and like lineages of colonial brutality, yeah, like racial stratification, racial violence. You know, I think that it's a really sort of compassionate exploration of like what it means to individually as well as collectively hold, or even try to hold, memories, and sort of the fact that things can be meaningful and important despite how violent they are, and simultaneously that burdening one singular person or one singular being with containing and making legible traumatic violent history and violent memory, like that's not that's not great. And it sort of also like unmoors other people. I don't know if that made any sense. I think I'm just also really tired, so yeah, I wish I could have talked better about that one. I'm sorry. I definitely think it's like worthwhile like reading and listening to, and I think also something that I really enjoyed about it was the way that the main character is very obviously sort of neurodivergent, but obviously that doesn't really exist in the world of the book, but like there is a lot of focus on like sensation and kind of like how overwhelming sensory stuff is, including flashbacks, memories, that kind of thing that are traumatic, but also how like beautiful that kind of connection can be, and like listening and hearing and feeling. And I guess that's also sort of where, in terms of maybe like individual experiences of like PTSD or like whatever, where in response to being triggered or having a flashback you do focus a lot on your senses. And I do feel like that there's a way that the book is very kind of like sort of vague and floaty, in part because of like the setting, but it's also very grounded, especially coming to the end of the novella, grounded in like a way that is about committing to being present in a life that is difficult to live, whether that's because of things that happened to you or because of things that happened to people whose memories you carry, or both. Maybe I said something else interesting there, I don't know. I also guess I wanted to come on because I picked up a book. So I got this book, Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh. Long-time viewers of the channel will know that I'm a big Sophie Mackintosh fangirl. I mean, actually, I guess like I loved her first novel, The Water Cure. Like I loved it. And then her second novel, Blue Ticket, I liked bits of, but I didn't like as much overall. But I am excited for this one, which is Cursed Bread. I think I saw somebody refer to Sophie Mackintosh as being Welsh, so if I did read this month, that would be great for Dairython. I'm not sure if she is, I haven't like checked that. Yeah, I think that I might like this more than Blue Ticket, but I mean, we'll see. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is also why I was like definitely going to pick it up, but also I literally was just like, give it to me as soon as I heard about it being really. It's really annoying though, because it was very hard to find, like, but yeah, it's pretty short too, which is kind of nice. Exciting stuff. Also, I feel like I was thinking about her work too, and I was thinking about how like a lot of it's sort of gay but it's not gay, and I wonder if the same thing will happen here. I kind of feel like it probably will. I mean, maybe Blue Ticket is gay, but like it's not that gay. Anyway, we'll see. I'm sure I'll obviously tell you about this when I read it. I have made some headway in Everfair, but not loads. I'm on page 136 and I'm really enjoying it so far. Something sad just happened though, but like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's just got like a lot, and I feel like it's doing a lot, and like it's fitting it all in together so far, and like I think that's quite impressive. Yeah. All right, I will update you another time. I guess like we are kind of getting to the end of the month. I mean, there's still maybe like over like a week and a half I guess left, but I don't think I'll update you that many more times. Hey, I'm eating a little snack, but wanted to update you because it's like the 26th of March, so really in the crunch time. Also, I can just feel myself wanting to like start a whole bunch of books, so. But I did finish Everfair by Nisi Shawl. I think it's great. A really fun book about the sort of like an alternative history version of Congo history, I guess, and like resistance to Belgian colonialism and kind of like the difficulties of making alliances, politics, nationhood, all of these various things sort of happening. Utopianism in the sense of like building, creating new worlds, trying to do that collectively, failing in that, but also maybe succeeding in other ways. Like, it's great. You know, I think it's an interesting book about politics. It's not a character focused book. It's about 380 pages, and I feel like if this was like a character study of one person, like that would do it, like that would cover them properly, but this isn't in that sense. It has many different viewpoints and perspectives, and it floats from person to person and place to place, although obviously it is like centered around the Congo. Yeah, and obviously it is like steampunky, as the cover would suggest, so it's an alternative history. Not only that, but it then also plays around with technological advancement and like what happened if technological advancement had happened much earlier and like there was access to like steam power and things like that. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it. It's very fun. I watched an interview on Onyx Page's channel, which I will link in the description box, because it was great to watch after having read this. And Nisi Shawl talks about like Lisette, who's one of the main characters in this, being based on Colette, who was a French writer, potentially spy, and who's like a queer woman as well, and also who's mixed race, which I didn't know. So that was also really interesting for me, because like I have like Colette's books on my TBR. Like I have one of her books called The Impure and the Impure. The Pure and the Impure, I mean. You know, she's like part of my boneless kind of reading, I guess, sometimes. So yeah, anyway, that was cool. It's gay and it's great. I would really recommend this. Oh yeah, I wanted to say, and you know, the way that technology comes in is also interesting, and from like a crypt perspective, because a lot of the augmentations that are being made is in response to people being injured during like war and the brutal colonization that was happening. So you know, there's people with like, I've forgotten the word, like, but you know, they have contraptions and hands, like metal hands made, which you can see in the cover there. To somewhat waylay myself from starting more books, although I am going to start new ones in April, I think that's as far as I can go. I did get this out of the library again, which is The Essential Acts to Watch Out For by Alison Bechdel. I'm about 100 pages in right now, and it is obviously quite long. It's like 400 pages, slightly less, but obviously it's comics, so it doesn't take that long to read. It's all black and white, in case you've never seen a Dykes to Watch Out For comic, and it's really enjoyable. I was reading a couple on the journey back home from the library, and yeah, just like getting back into it. I don't know that I will finish this within the time, because it is just like a lot of comic to read, even though they don't take that long. Yeah, I guess like the two other things that I could potentially finish during this vlog, although I think one of them is very unlikely, are the Dr. Edith Fain and the Hares of Corley Hall, and then one that is more likely, although I don't know, I mean maybe. Okay, I've got like 150 pages left of this, which is The Night Watch, so it's doable, but we'll see. I've also been knitting, and I kind of wanted to show you this like weird little swatch I'm making, because I have some plans. I was just trying to see if like the colours would work together, and also I've done like 2 different patterns to see kind of how the fabric looks. So yeah, also hopefully the next time you see me my fringe won't look so awful, because like I'm not happy with it right now, but I got some stuff to like make it less awful. Bye! I have a little book haul to share with you, because I went to the library and they had like a 50p and 20p book section. The kids' books were 20p, and full books that are like withdrawn. And so I picked up this Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. I can't remember if it is queer, because like I know it's like based off, well, is it based off of Amelia Earhart? I can't remember, but she was like gay. Yeah, I tried to listen to this on audio and I didn't really like it, so yeah, and it was 50p, so I was like, well, obviously. Also, it does have like great colours, and there's a little note in it that I just saw. PJ, I'll get one from City and put on next Friday. Don't know what that means. I also picked up this book on Yeka and the Academy of the Sun by Tolo Kogu. It looks really cute. It was also shortlisted for the Jalak Prize for the kids and children's, the children's and YA or whatever section, like long list. And I like to try and read something from the Jalak Prize, although I'm not necessarily that great. It's got this like gorgeous cover, and it looked really fun and cute. And obviously I've been like reading quite a lot of kids' books, so I also read 2 books that were kids' books about Hanukkah. One of these I wanted to read around Hanukkah time, but like I couldn't access it then, and I decided I'd still read it now, because I was like, It looks cute, at least for one of them. Another of them I just read because I was like interested in what they would say about Hanukkah, and I thought it was really bad. That's Hannah the Hanukkah fairy in those like Rainbow Magic Daisy Meadows fairy books, which I used to be like obsessed with as a kid. I love them a lot. They started out with the like colour fairies, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, the series focuses on various different festivals, but like it didn't really tell you anything about Hanukkah at all. Like it just told you, like, it didn't even really say anything about like the miracle of the oil, the 8 days and nights. It just talked about donuts and like the menorah / candles. But even then, I mean, like, not everybody lights candles, right? They have oil. Anyway, I thought that was kind of silly, but I did really enjoy the other book that I read, which was this, All of a Kind Family Hanukkah, based on the classic books by Sydney Taylor, by Emily Jenkins and Paul O. Zelensky, which I really liked the drawing style of. And I'm pretty sure that I saw this book on Hannah's books because she did a video about her favourite children's Hanukkah books, something like that. I will leave it in the description box. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, so I'm glad I picked it up. Had a brief break there because I actually did want to finish this before I finished this vlog, which I will do now. This is going to be the last update. I guess this is also kind of like a long-term wrap-up. That's sort of what I've treated it like. But yeah, I just finished this, literally like just finished this, and it's the 31st of March and it's like about to be Shabbat, so whilst I might do some more reading, I think I will read a bit more of this. I'm definitely not going to finish anything before it becomes April. And before I talk about the Night Watch, I am now on page like 180, so I'm about 50% of the way through this and I'm really enjoying it. And like I could, I guess, have like tried to finish this, but it would be such a shame because it's really enjoyable and I love reading it, and like I want to like, you know, savor it, or at least like be intentional and like properly take it in, because it's, yeah, it's like very funny and like sort of relatable, but also sort of like fun and fascinating to see, like, you know, 90s queer life, dyke life. So yeah, the Night Watch. I'm gonna try and keep it brief, but basically I thought this was really good. I definitely feel like in comparison with like Fingersmith, for example, you can tell that like Sarah Waters's technique and like hold over the craft of writing has improved in this, and probably too with Tipping the Velvet. I mean, that's still going to be my favourite. I do think I like the Night Watch better than I liked Fingersmith. Not that I dislike Fingersmith, but you know, I kind of feel like, for me, I guess sometimes I feel like Sarah Waters is kind of like a 5-star author who I don't give 5 stars to every time, if that makes sense. Like all of her books are just like inherently great, and then it's sort of about like my personal enjoyment. So like Tipping the Velvet, I did give 5 stars to and I loved so much, and then this one I guess like I didn't enjoy it quite in the same kind of like pleasurable, just like falling into the story kind of way as with Tipping the Velvet, but I did think that this was really great and I really enjoyed a lot of it. And like I mentioned like a butch car mechanic before, and like I do love her, but I think like I love Kay the most, and like I'd love to be her wife, like but yeah, it's like it's like really interesting too. It's sort of about like sexual dissidence in the 40s with the sort of backdrop of the war. There's also this like very intense scene very intense, where, you know, somebody's getting like an abortion and stuff, like a dentist abortionist, which I found quite hard to read, but was also really fascinating and also kind of like interesting to be reading now when I'm thinking so much about like 20th century reproductive history, especially like considering the 40s is before 1967, which is when the abortion bill came in. Yeah, I would really recommend this. I also feel like, you know, I think especially if you read historical fiction, it can be really easy to get like bored by 1940s settings, but I think this does something like interesting with that, and like doesn't just tell you the same kind of old stories. It explores like people and places that, you know, you don't often get to see. There's, you know, there's dykes, there's also like one man who is sort of queer but also sort of not queer, but like kind of, and he's sort of a conscientious objector but he's kind of not, and so we also kind of follow him alongside, I guess, 3 main women all in London. So yeah, I'm really glad I finished this month, and you know, I'm really excited to read some more Sarah Waters. I think the next one I'm going to read from her is probably Affinity, because I think that will be right on my street. Definitely let me know if you've read any of the books that I talk about in this. I guess, considering I didn't finish this and I kind of did start this month, I don't think I made that much more progress with my currently reading list. I mean, I think I got rid of like 5, made some progress, not as much progress as maybe I would like, but I am in like a less overwhelmed position, I think, kind of. If you want to leave like a gay emoji, so I posted this on TikTok about whether there was like a fisting scene, because there's a great fisting scene in Tipping the Velvet, and I was like waiting with bated breath if there was a fisting scene in this, and there isn't one, but there's one that gets like kind of close, but it's not, but it's like kinda. So yeah, there's a little update for you in case, you know, you've been also waiting with bated breath, but I like, you know, I wouldn't read it for that scene. Yeah, if you want to leave like a gay emoji or like an emoji to do with class struggle, then in the comments, then you know, that'd be cool if you've watched this far. Yeah, I hope you had a good time watching this, and yeah, I guess Shabbat Shalom. Bye.